Hey guys, John Phoenix here from Dennis Kirk, and I have with me Jim Green from our purchasing department. Jim has his own little shop in Rush City,
Hugo, Minnesota.
He's been wrenching for quite a few years here, and we had a customer bring in a, what is this, a mid-80s?
This is an early 1984 Harley Davidson Evolution motor.
Okay, and we're going to be doing a top-end build on it?
We're going to do a top-end rebuild. So today we are going to show you how to disassemble the top end of this motor.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll get out of your way, and hopefully everybody watching this video can learn something.
Perfect.
All right.
In part 1 of this 3-part series, we degreased and power washed the engine. This is important to do, so if you haven't watched part 1, make sure to check this video out first.
So the first thing we want to do is start with the rocker boxes. The rocker boxes will be under a load. Push rods are under a load. So we will take this apart. This will be the first process of taking this engine apart. So now we're going to remove the top cover. And then we have a D-ring, or the spacer as it's called. And now we can see the rocker arm assembly inside the engine. Now that we have the cover off, we can see the rocker arm assembly right here. And we can make the rockers move. We want to take a load off the rocker arms, so when we disassemble this, we don't wreck or warp the lower rocker assembly. So here we have, these are 7/16 bolts. There's 3 bolts right here. They're smaller bolts. These are carrying the load of the rocker arms. If we take these off first, we could break the rocker assembly because the spring pressure is too much for this hardware right here. So first we take this, then these 3, and then we go for the big bolts here. To back them off equally all the way around, so you bring the bottom rocker assembly comes up evenly. You don't want it to warp or crack. Okay, now that we have the pressure off, we can go ahead and just take the rest of the bolts out. And we can remove the rocker. Now that we are done with the rocker assembly, you can see the push rods and the valve springs. The exhaust, your intake, your exhaust and intake push rods. Okay, so now we're going to remove the push rods. And we're going to remove the push rod tubes. And this is done simply with a screwdriver. You grab them right here, and you just twist them off. Same with the other side. Okay, I'm going to show you how this push rod tube actually works. So you have the lower and the upper push rod tube. Here's an O-ring, a washer, and then a spring. And it's very important that you have this washer in there. It helps seal and it protects the O-ring. And because it's spring loaded, when you put the push rod tube together, the spring holds this top part of the push rod in place, which holds it into the motor. Here we took the whole cylinder stud out with the hardware, so that can happen, so that will need to be replaced. And this one here is doing the same thing as the other side. This whole cylinder stud's coming with this head bolt right now. Okay, now that we have the heads off, we can remove the cylinders. You always want to protect the bottom end of the engine. If anything falls in there, you have to pull the whole motor apart. So then you'll be doing a lower end. Today we're just doing the top end. 70,000 miles on this engine, and the cylinders don't look too bad, but we're going to clean them up and put fresh pistons and rings in this motor. No excessive wear in this motor. Whoever owned this bike took very good care of it. They did away with this design where the bolt goes in, and now the bolt goes over. Fun. Okay, now we're going to remove the piston from the connecting rod, and here's a keeper right here, and that's what holds the wrist pin in the position so it doesn't come out during operation. Now that we've taken the keeper out and pushed the wrist pin through, we can remove the piston. Now that we have this apart, we can now go into the cam chest, and what I like to do to make the job easier is I have these are Tappet holders. This is a special tool. You put it in here and it holds the tappets up out of the way. And it's magnetized. We sell these here at Dennis Kirk. They're adjustable so you can reach the tappet or lifter. And the reason why we're doing this is when we pull the cam out, they just don't fall inside the engine. And it helps when you install the cam in the lifters, it keeps them up out of the way so you can get the cam in. Okay, now we're going to take the cam cover off and get to the cam. All different lengths. So it's good to keep track of where they go. Now when you remove this cover, you're going to have oil come out of the engine. And depending how long the engine's been sitting, it could be a couple ounces or it could be a half a gallon, who knows. So you always want to be prepared to catch the oil. For those who are wondering, this is an exhaust bracket and it helps secure the front exhaust pipe. This motor came out of a rubber mounted FXR style motorcycle. So you can't hook the exhaust to the frame because the engine's bouncing inside the frame on a rubber mount system. Some guys would take a screwdriver at this point and beat it off, but they make a special tool to take it off so you don't damage anything. I'll take the dust cover off, the electronic ignition area. In the old days it was points and condenser. Now it's an electronic ignition. So this is the electronic ignition. This is what times your motorcycle. If you're going to reuse this sensor plate, if you mark the timing with this, you can scribe a mark. And I usually go off this, where this little V is right here. This is an adjuster. You can adjust it. So what I do is I scribe a line right into the case. Now I can put that back together and still have the motor be on time. And let me show you what I mean by you can adjust it. So this is how you can advance and retard your engine. So I don't know if the camera's picking up my line or not right here, but we scribe that line to the bottom part of the V shape towards the engine, towards the front of the bike. So if I bring it back to where the line meets the sensor plate right there, my bike is back in time right now. Save you a lot of headaches. This is a cup with notches in it right here. And when that cup swings past the sensor right here, so that gap right here, when it swings past this area right here, that's when you throw the spark or send a signal to the coil. You know, if you're idling at 1,000 RPMs, this thing's spinning 1,000 times a minute. And so when this swings past the gap, it throws a signal to the coil, which in turn throws a spark. Okay, next we're going to remove this rotor or cup, and that is bolted to the end of the camshaft. So this is the cup. There's a little notch right here, and then there's a notch in the end of the camshaft that secures it. Okay, now like I said earlier, some guys will just beat this thing off with a hammer or try and get in here, and that'll ruin your gasket surface and it'll leave a mark, and it's not the proper way to do it. So we sell this tool at Dennis Kirk here. This is how you remove the cover. So you take the bolts that were holding your sensor plate and you install them back in to hold this tool into place. And it doesn't have to be very tight. Just got to hold it in there. Now this bolt will push on the cam and the cover will come off. You can see it starting to separate. So here we have the oil draining out of the bottom now. Here we can remove the cam cover altogether. Now here's a washer that goes on your breather gear. So it's very important that you don't lose this. And a lot of times, just as like right now, they will stick on the back of the cam cover. And as you're going to put this wherever you're going to put it, on your workbench or in a drain bucket or what have you, you lose that washer and you forget to put it on. It's a problem. Okay, so now that we have the cam cover off, I want to point out that the cam has a timing mark, has 2 timing marks on it. This timing mark lines up with the pinion gear, runs off the pinion shaft, and the other timing mark runs with the breather gear. Very important that these are lined up. If they aren't lined up, you'll have bad ventilation here with the breather assembly, and your timing will be off in your motor with this if you don't have these lined up. And like I said before, you can cause damage to your valve train, break a guide, bend push rods, break valves. So it's important that these timing marks are lined up when you reassemble the engine. Now we talked about doing a top end, but this customer also wants to go ahead and put new cams in new cam in his bike. So we're going to wake this thing up a little bit. So now, if we were going to reuse this cam, when you pull the cam out, you want to inspect for wear. If there's any pitting, that means the hardening of the metal of this cam is starting to get weak, and that'll cause a problem. This cam looks okay, but we're replacing it anyways. And we can remove the lifters right now at this point. Okay, now we have the bolts out of the lifters. Okay, so now we just give them a little tap, and they should come right out. And this is your tappet block. So your lifters ride on the camshaft, and they go up and down. You also want to inspect the lifters for wear. At 70,000 miles on this engine, I'm going to replace these lifters. You should probably replace the lifters at about every 100,000 miles. Let's take a look at this lifter. This one's probably getting ready to go. When this thing falls apart in your engine, there's needle bearings inside this lifter roller right here. When this thing comes apart, it's going to wreak havoc on your lower end. So this is why we want to replace them at this point. Okay, so here your cam shim. It's very important, and I'll show you this when we put it back together. You set up the proper end play, and the end play is from 0 to 50 thousandths clearance, which is a lot, but when I set it up, I like to set it up around 8 to 12. There's thrust washers that the cam ride on, and they come in different thicknesses. So back to the timing mark on this gear. As you can see, there's a slot of ventilation area right here, and that works that's part of your breather system and scavenger.
Make sure to keep all the removed parts in one general area, labeling them if needed. This will help if another project pops up or you're not able to get to this rebuild right away. For more information on the products featured in this video, click on the link in the description area below. Feel free to call us with any questions or to place an order at 800-969-7501. Be sure to subscribe for the latest DK events, videos, and promos, and give us a thumbs up or leave a comment if you think this video was helpful. It'll help gauge future videos for the next time you have a question about the top names in power sports.